What's up? I'm Coach Dan Blewett. In today's video, let's talk about arm care. So obviously we all know today that arm care is important. It's a part of the injury prevention sort of suite of things that players can do, to ward off injuries as best they can. And it's also a huge performance enhancer. If you strengthen your rotator cuff and all the muscles involved in your shoulder, you're gonna throw harder. It's a fact of nature. So let's cover arm care and some of the things you should be doing or maybe shouldn't be worrying so much about by age. All right, so let's start this conversation about injury prevention exercises in baseball by saying, hey, like why do players typically have pain? And so when we're talking about adding arm care to the mix, that's like we're adding something to our regimen, right? But we also need to think about things that we can subtract first. So just remember that arm care is not a replacement for smart throwing habits. If you're overusing your son, or if you're a coach and you're overusing your players, or if you're a player and you're being overused and not speaking up about it, arm care, it will maybe help, but it's probably not going to outrun the fact that your arm is being abused, that you're throwing too much, all stuff like that. So make sure you ask these questions first. Do I need more arm care, or do I need less overuse? Do I need more arm care, or do I need better practice and training habits? Like, do you ramp up properly during the off season? Do you get enough strength training workouts, and do you get them at the right timing? Do you stagger your bullpens and your hard throwing days with days of rest and recovery afterwards? Do you need more arm care, or do you need better pitching mechanics? It's important just to, again, consider arm care as part of the entire equation, not just this thing that we can just start doing to try to mask some of the other bad habits that we might have. Because again, arm care will not fix abusing your arm and doing just, bad things like overuse. So let's first talk about ages 11 and under. These are the really young players, right? Will arm care actually have an effect on this group? And my answer here is no. And there's a couple reasons why. And understand that I owned a baseball and softball academy for many years. I did strength training and all this stuff. And I preach arm care as much as anybody because I've had 2 elbow surgeries and I want players to stay healthy. But having worked with lots of players of all ages over the years, kids this young, like really more like 12 and under, they just don't do arm care exercises very well. They breeze through them. They're not super focused. And you can only coach them and sort of admonish them so much before they're just like, look, 11-year-olds just aren't great at certain things, attention-wise, focus-wise, etc. So just understand if your kid's 11 or under, or if you're 11 and under, you're probably not going to do this consistent enough or properly enough to really get a significant benefit out of it. So I just wouldn't worry about this too much. And the nice thing is that players who are 11 under also don't throw that hard. You don't hear of players tearing their arms to shreds because they throw like 55 miles per hour, right? So there's not as much stress throwing the arm. I'm not saying that arm care wouldn't help this group, because it would help any group, right? But in reality, in practice, not just in theory, there's not a huge benefit to this group just because they're so young and the risk is also lower. Let's go to 12 and 13. This is where players start to get a little more serious. They start to throw a little harder. Some kids can, really shoot up and get that early growth spurt. There's a big range of sizes and shapes of kids at this age. But this is also still, players are still really young. They're likely to be as committed to it as they need to. They're unlikely to be as adhere to these programs as well as they should. And it's just tedious. And this is the thing that I want everyone to understand. Arm care is boring. It's tedious. It is part of the work stuff that goes with baseball. There's a trade-off to all that. When you're really young, you don't want to do a lot of this super tedious, annoying stuff. It's literally just like homework for baseball. And having done this for like 13 years straight, I can tell you that it sucks. And I was super burned out of this when I was 30 years old and retiring. So just understand, if you're a 12 or 13-year-old and you're motivated to do arm care, that's wonderful, and I applaud you. A lot of players are not going to be motivated because their arm doesn't hurt yet, and they're just still young and like, hey, why do I need arm care? My arm feels great. I can throw hard. I can throw strikes. Like I'm never sore. So they really don't see the benefit of it there. But if you do have a son, or if you want to do arm care at age 12 or 13, I applaud you. And just think 2 to 4 times a week. Really, if it's 2 or 3, that's always better than nothing. And this is still an age where better than nothing is great. So if a kid's doing it now, wonderful. But again, I wouldn't push this so hard because it's still not like the biggest deal. 14 and 15, this is really a transition age where kids start to hit puberty. They sprout up. They start throwing a lot harder. At 14, 15, you see a lot of kids throwing in the 70s, starting to sneak into the 80s, the very best of them. And that's where you throw seriously hard. And that's where the velocity, the longer arm length. There's more torque going through your elbow and your shoulder. If you're pitching 100 pitches, throwing 82 miles per hour, that's a lot more force than 100 pitches at 60 miles per hour, 65. So this is just where you start to reach that area where it's like, I do throw hard enough where overuse can really cause a serious injury. And, just the stresses of being a pitcher in general can cause serious injury. Obviously, players of any position can and should do arm care, but really the biggest focus should be on pitchers. And again, everyone should do it, but pitchers have to start doing it really at this age. It really starts to matter at 14, 15. And this is where 3 days a week is really important. And this is something you can also get, hopefully, integrated with your strength training. If you go to a sports performance place where they do a good job for baseball and softball specific training, really what that means is they're going to integrate some arm care into their workouts, whether it's a couple exercises during their workout and then maybe a couple more when they're done, kind of like a little bit separate at the end. That's how we used to do it. That's a great way to do it. But this is that transition age, like entering high school or 8th grade, where arm care really starts to matter, and players need to start to understand that this is something that you do if you want to stay healthy long term, and otherwise you're going to start to suffer the consequences. And this is also a time when pitchers do start to see pain crop up. If they're throwing too much, they're having overuse issues, or they just have open growth plates, or they're just not well trained. They haven't done much strength training or much arm care, and they really throw well and they throw a lot. This is where their body starts to say, hey, this throwing thing, this pitching thing doesn't really agree with me that well. And that's usually what leads a lot of players into starting arm care for the first time, which is that they start to have problems and their arm doesn't feel very good, and they get sore, and they get, soreness is normal. It depends, but like they start to get pain, and they're like, I don't want to be in pain. So they start to realize that arm care is a benefit to their body. And at ages 16 plus, this is like sophomore, junior year, it's really just a mandatory necessity if you're going to be a pitcher. And if you don't feel compelled to do arm care at this age, then you really need to look in the mirror and question your own commitment to being a pitcher long term. Again, position players should absolutely be doing this too, but you don't see the injuries from outfielders, shortstops as much. But of course, at this level, you're usually doing both. If you have a pretty good arm, you play the outfield, you're probably pitching too. You play shortstop for your team, you're probably a pitcher too. Catchers are also, so much overuse goes on with their arms. Catchers definitely need this, right? Everyone needs this at 16 plus, but again, pitchers are always the number one group that needs arm care. And again, this is a necessity, 3 to 5 days a week. It should be probably like a dedicated 20-minute session for those 3 to 5 days a week, and then probably some more in their strength training workouts. And there should be an arm care component as part of your warm-up. You do your bands, whatever it is at the field. So this is, again, where you really start to become, where baseball becomes a little more of a job. The older you get, the more these things get added in. So again, let's talk about dedication. Like, is a player going to do this? For most, and this has been my experience as a coach and a player, most players are not going to really start to be very dedicated to this until they have some kind of arm pain. I'm not saying a serious injury, but it's like, yeah, my elbow hurts now after weekend tournaments where I pitch a bunch of innings and we play 5 games. Those, as a parent, shouldn't alarm you so much. They're probably going to end up being a good thing for your kid in the long run, because a little bit of pain's not going to break them down, but it might give them the kick in the pants that they need to really start taking their health and their body seriously. And I've seen this time and time again where I'm like, you got to start your arm care. And they're like, okay. And then finally, when their shoulder starts to bark at them, then they say, okay, hey, what was that arm care you were talking about? And that's when they really start to go at it. So just understand that's just how humans are in general, right? We don't forecast. People build, beautiful houses on the coastline. And what happens? People warn them that the hurricane might come. They don't care. But until the hurricane comes and finally smashes their house to pieces or really scares them, it's until that moment a lot of times that people really consider whether they actually see the consequences of certain actions. So this is one, just to understand from a practical standpoint, it might take some pain or discomfort or sitting on the bench for a couple of weeks resting and healing up for your kid to really get dedicated to arm care. So takeaways: don't make baseball feel like a job too early. Again, if your kid's 11 or younger, do you need to be militaristic about getting them to do their arm care? I just don't think you don't. Again, every kid's different. So this is just advice, just general advice. But in general, you don't see a lot of catastrophic injuries from pitching at that age. And of course, you want to have a good coach who's not overusing them, and you're smart about their training and all that stuff too. If you need help with that, check out my online courses in the description below. My beginner one especially helps give you a roadmap for all that. But look, baseball needs to be fun for a good amount of the time that they play when they're young. And then it will slowly start to feel more like a job as they get older. But if they still have the passion for it because they loved it when they were young, then they'll stick with it and they'll start to eat some of these less fun things as they get older. Is your kid self-motivated, or do they want to do arm care? If they want to do arm care, then you're gold. But again, like pushing people into stuff doesn't work that well usually. And this is especially important as kids get older. They start throwing hard, like in the 70 plus mile per hour range. And then as their bodies just start to change, hit puberty, become more like a man than like a little boy. So try to get arm care in there as much as you can. My last point here, like little doses do add up over time. So even if they're not super duper committed to it, if they're doing something, it's always better than nothing. And I know that kind of flies in the face of what I was saying about really younger kids. But again, when they just like speed through it, again, I've seen this time and time again. It's like strength training is really good for younger kids because when they're doing a push-up, they're strengthening their shoulders. When they're doing rows and they're doing, body weight rows and pull-ups and like goblet squats, all those things are helping to strengthen the entire chain, where I think strength training in general is really good for young players. And that serves as arm care for that demographic. And then as they get older, then you have to really start to target more the rotator cuff and other exercises for the shoulder, just because squats and all that stuff won't do that at that older age. So hopefully this was helpful. Obviously, arm care is super important, and I want everyone here watching my videos to stay healthy. And as a parent, it can be tough to navigate, like how much should you be pushing for them to do? And just like anything, it kind of ramps up as they get older. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. You can support the channel through my books, online courses, all that. You'll also find that in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.